We have to do two things at once. We have to bring this epidemic to an end, primarily by getting the vaccine out in large numbers to the entire world. And we have to make sure that we're ready because there will be another pandemic. And there's so many lessons about how we weren't prepared, how we should have handled things differently. And, when that's clearly in our mind, those investments need to be made.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus. If we start now, we can be ready for the next epidemic.
The U.S. gets a low score because the understanding of how to get diagnostics up to scale early to stop the exponential spread. If that had been done well, we would have been more like an Australia or a South Korea, where the death toll is less than a tenth of the tragic situation in the United States. So we made mistakes before the epidemic in not investing more. And then during the epidemic, we also made mistakes. There's one category we did well, which was getting R&D money out to the vaccine companies. The U.S. was the biggest at that. And so at least, in that one area where we've set a model for the world. Well, the great thing is that the tens of billions required for all that preparedness, it's the insurance policy that avoids you losing tens of trillions like we are globally right now. And so it's quite a bargain, even if you only look at what it can do to help during a pandemic. But those investments can also help us improve health on a much broader basis. So the mRNA vaccine can be used for TB and HIV. We're very excited about that, and we've been funding mRNA for over 10 years, and now it's accelerated its development. And getting those early warning systems in, that'll improve health all over the world. So this time, I think people will pay attention. Well, it's pretty stunning that the infection rate and death rate in minorities has been over twice as high. And that really wouldn't have been expected. In fact, we need to understand it a lot better. It's partly multi-generational households. It's partly job occupation. It may have been the ability to communicate health messages in to those households. I'm stunned at that. Sadly, I'm not stunned with the idea that the inner city schools were the least prepared with internet connections and training in order to do online education. And so the gap between the suburban schools and the inner city schools, which was already very large and a terrible inequity, it's been more dramatic in this last year than ever. And so we've got to reinvest in those schools, taking some of the good things we've learned about how we can use online tools, but helping those kids catch up. Well, contact tracing was incredibly beneficial in places like South Korea. And, we'd have hundreds of thousands of people alive today in the US if we had done that. The data, you don't actually have to give up your personal data. That's not a fair way of describing it. Some societies really chose to make that work. Sadly, because of our mistakes in diagnostics, our numbers got so large that even the states that made an effort, the benefits of the contact tracing wasn't gigantic. So it's really as you get down in, lower infection rates, like 3-4%, then the contact tracing helps drive that down even lower. Yeah, so both myself and Dr. Fauci have featured in conspiracy theories. Like one says that Dr. Fauci's trying to make money off of these vaccines and various negative things about me. You're encouraging people not to trust the advice on masks or taking the vaccine, and that could be damaging. It's a new phenomena. I don't know, will it hurt the vaccine uptake where everyone who takes the vaccine is not just protecting themselves, but reducing their transmission to other people and allowing society to get back to normal? So it's a completely unexpected phenomena. And, sadly, a lot of it's based on false information. Whenever you make mistakes, you have to learn from them. And the U.S. has so much talent, so much ability to get things right, so much ability to lead the world and help. Almost every infectious disease event of the last 100 years, the U.S. Played a very strong role. The CDC is the most respected health organization. In this one, we didn't set a good example, and we even withdrew from the WHO. So, it wasn't our finest hour, but I remain optimistic, and I look at the new team that's engaged, looking at the science, being willing to deliver the bad news that the next few months are going to continue to be tough. And, I feel great that we're correcting some of the mistakes that were made.
You mentioned the new team. Was President Biden right to rejoin the WHO? And have you spoken to him recently, or will you?
I spoke to him, Melinda and I, soon after the election, and the pandemic was definitely one of the key topics there. And we're thrilled that he's rejoined the WHO, because that's where you share best practices. That's where you make sure the numbers are there to see what's going on. For example, understanding these variants that are a bit scary because they are more transmissive, and we'll get data soon on whether the vaccines are slightly less effective or not. And so, yes, it's kind of a common sense move to bring the world together, because it's us versus the disease. And every one of these vaccines involved scientists in many countries, and the trials were done in many countries. No country alone could possibly deal with this. To go forward, there are a lot of questions. Microsoft wasn't in the social media business, where issues about political things and conspiracies and how should you draw the line on what's on there. The tech companies are so important now, it's not surprising that the governments are looking at competition and interoperability, so there are lessons, there are things that Microsoft learned as we interface with the government. I hope the others go back and look at how that all went. But it makes sense for government to care a lot about the central role of technology and making sure that we get more of the good and less of the bad. And they're looking for a simple explanation. It's been primarily myself and Dr. Fauci that our motive for why we're trying to get a vaccine and what the vaccine does, that's come under a lot of attack. And that's kind of sad, because the vaccine story, the Gavi, cheap vaccines for diarrhea and pneumonia, and the record reduction in childhood deaths, it's an incredibly positive story. We've gone from 10 million deaths a year to 5 million deaths a year because of the vaccine work.